Hey guys, this is James with thesprayking.com. Today I wanted to make you guys a little video about how to do small patches around the house. Anything from about 1 or 2 inches, 3 inches, doorknob holes, things like that. Today I'm going to show you how the basic doorknob hole happens behind the door all the time. You get a hole about this size and it needs to be fixed, and they're pretty easy. So we'll run through it today. I just made one with my hammer just there. Also, you always want to have a clean blade with you when you cut sheetrock, either around levels and T-squares and whatnot by hand. Sometimes they tend to scurvy off if your blade's not too clean, so make sure it's always changed and fresh blade before you start cutting any patches. Just a little rule of thumb to stick with. And next, we're going to talk about how the double methods I use to cut out a patch. This first method I'm probably using here, you can use a level just by doing a couple of lines, maybe one on the top and one horizontal line. There's really 500 different ways you can make your original scribes on how you cut the patch out, but here I show 2 different ways. I show one with the level, just showing a couple of lines there, how to do it with the level. Another one I do, you can use like a T-square or a speed square. Here I use a speed square. And you just pull it, basically you're making a square. Any sort of way to make a square would work. So even if you could just cut it out manually, it really doesn't matter. But the main thing is I use these methods to keep it nice and square, and so when I cut my piece, it's even numbers when I'm on my measurements. Here's another little tip I use. I use my drywall knife to first originally score the lines I made, because if you just stick your drywall saw in there and start cutting, it's a little harder to cut because you're not breaking through the face paper too much, especially if you got a dull drywall saw. So just nice to start with a couple of fresh lines done with the X-Acto knife, and once you do that, it's real easy. You'll see right here when I use my saw, it's really easy to cut, and it kind of gives you a guide on where you're cutting. So, and it just mows through it like butter. So that's another thing. Again, there's probably 50 different ways to cut the drywall patch out. You can use a fine tool. People use sawzalls. I'm just showing you one way. This is my way for a small patch, and there's just probably 500 different ways. Anyways, we go on right here by cutting out the back, score the side right there. Make sure you don't drop the patch into the hole. Get any sort of debris out of the way, get your blade, sort of clean up your area, and then get it ready to install some backing. Right here, that stud in the back is on the back wall. It's not in the front, so I need to install some backing. I kind of look around and make sure I have enough room on both sides to install some backing. And any backing you want to use, you can use some 1x, some trim you have lying around the house, just pretty much any sort of wood. I've used shims, I've used paint sticks. It really doesn't matter as long as it holds the sheetrock well enough to support the patch while you're mudding it. Now here I'm going to show you how, if you're installing backing, you can use a couple of starter screws. Stick one on each side of the patch. Get your piece of 1x, slip it on in, and make sure you're holding it as you're screwing it. You're holding it as you're screwing it because there's no possible way it'll stay there if you don't. So make sure your patch is big enough, you got room for your fingers, all that, to hold the piece of wood. Now you're screwed in. Where I'm going to put one on the bottom just to be safe. It probably would support with just one, but I'll put 2 just to be extra safe. And again, we can use any sort of wood. We can use 1x. You can use 2x4 if you have enough room to slip it in there like I just did. That's why I don't use 2x4, because it's usually not enough room in the back to slip the piece in there. So it's nice to use 1x or a smaller sort of piece of wood. And when you're screwing these in, make sure you don't over screw it and break the face paper when you're screwing it in right there. Like I made sure that those screws are not protruding out and they're not poking in too far and breaking the face paper. You break the face paper and then you're defeating the purpose of the patch. you're going to have problems with that screw because you broke the face paper when you're mudding it. So try to keep it nice and secure, and my piece fits perfectly. And make sure that when your piece is in there that it's not sticking out too far or too in. Just make sure nice and clean. And here I'm just marking where my little studs are there, my little backer marks, and I'm going to put one screw in the top, one screw in the bottom. And like I was talking about the patch, just make sure when your patch is there, none of the papers lifting off the sides, or just make sure you have a nice even plane. So when you tape, and even right there, there's a little bit of paper lifting right there, and I will actually take care of that before I mud it. See, now the patch is nice and cleaned up, ready to go. And the first method we can be doing this would be using paper tape, but today we're going to use mesh tape. And again, there's 500 different methods, but we're going to use methods with hot mud and mesh tape. Hot mud dries in a specific time, 20, 40, and 90 minute. And here I made sure my mud was nice and creamy. I'm using I think a 20-minute or 5-minute mud here, and just make sure before you start mudding the patch that it's nice and creamy, no lumps, no bumps in there. Like I said, there's 50 different ways to do a patch. You can use paper tape, regular mud, it's not a problem. I do it all the time, but just for this video I'm using hot mud. Oh, yep, and yep, for all the YouTubers out there, yes, I'm using a rusty knife there. My work truck is not here all the time at home, so when I made this video, it was just some knives laying around the garage. A lot of people like to mention how the knives are rusty in my videos, but if you use them a lot, you leave them out in the rain and use them a lot and they're down to the metal, they're going to rust. So it happens. But my knives are straight and my patches look good, so that's how it goes. So make sure your mud is not that lumpy. And see, I got a nice creamy mix. And what I'm doing here is just evening out the mud before I do my final coats. And when I wipe my edges clean, I use my 6-inch knife just so I don't dig into the middle of the patch that much. If I dig in too much, it's going to take most of the mud out from the sides where I wanted it floated. So try to cut your edges with your 6-inch or a smaller knife so you don't dig in too much. And right there, my knife is real flat, really flat when I coat that stuff. Only a couple swipes, and I'm leaving mud on all the outside edges. And now we're going to let it sit for about 20 minutes or whatever requires. And then I just give, before I coat it again, I get my sponge and I clean it up a little bit. I get the ridges off, I clean the edges a little bit up. I use my I grab my 6-inch knife and grab a little bit of the fat, a little bit of the mud off the patch. And you'll see, if you do this every time before patches, they really clean up before the second coat. I mean, you touch up little things with the fat that's coming off the 6, like I just did right there. And they really clean up. So clean them up with the sponge a little bit between coats when you're using fast setting type compounds like hot mud. And then it's totally ready for another coat. So now I have some more mud. I'm going to coat it again. Make sure it's extra creamy before I put it on. And this is second coat. This is skimming mud. I want it a little thinner than what I had before. A little thicker for the top coat. Second coat, you want it a little thinner, but not much where it's dripping off the knife. Just a hair thinner. And again, I'm using my 14-inch knife. I want plenty of coverage, nice and wide. Again, I'll be talking about knives, what sizes to use later in other videos. If I'm vague on it now, it's just because I'm trying to do a basic patching video. I get a lot of comments about basic patching. So I'm trying to show a patch that's purely basic. Again, 14 is rusty, but really straight, really nice. That these patches will turn out nice, especially when they're small like this for doorknobs. They're going to turn out really well when you use a large knife, not a small knife. Use a 6-inch knife, it's not going to be that big. You make your patch a little bigger, like I'm showing right there, it floats it better, even if it's a small hole. And now you're pretty much ready for texture or for smooth wall or whatever you're going to do. The edges are feathered, everything's ready to go, sanded, no ridges, no bumps. It's ready for texture. So check out thesprayking.com.